I don't know if you have ever felt this way, but I do love vacationing. I do love going on adventures, but there's always something magical, and yes, I use the word magical, and you can do whatever you want with that in church, but I think there's something amazing about coming home after a vacation. There's something about getting back into your own bed, about having your coffee mug. Any coffee drinkers in the room? Any tea drinkers in the room? Any just straight water people that don't do caffeine in the morning? Yeah, you're so much better than us. So you know what? I love coming home to my coffee mug. I have a little bit of cream in my coffee. I love it. It's fantastic. I just love coming home after a vacation. There's something wonderful about that, particularly because we have a cabin in our family. It's about 500 square feet. This time around, there's about 5 of us that stayed in about 500 square feet, so you got about 100 square feet to call your own. And so we're all kind of on top of each other. When you get home, you get that space, and you just get to enjoy that a little bit. And your own bed, your own routine, there's just something about coming home. And what's interesting, though, is that routine and that joy of coming home, what's interesting about that is even the best of homes that we come back to, there's something that I've noticed about myself, and I hear often in other people, that as great as our homes are, that there's still things that we might miss, as best as a home might be. In some phases of our life, we eventually move out of our parents' homes. You know, some parents in the room might be like, my kids can move out at any point, right? I understand the economy and I understand all that stuff, but like, there's a point where our kids move out and then the home changes, or maybe we move out of our parents' homes, or maybe we had parents who live with us and then they're no longer living with us, or they're no longer with us. Maybe there's a part of it where when we experience home that we're like, can this feeling last? Because in the back of our minds, we know that there's a temporary nature about our homes. Maybe one day we'll be in the current place, what we call home geographically, but maybe we'll sell our house one day. And there's something in the back of our minds that we know that it's temporary. And we ask ourselves the question, whether we say it directly like this or not, is there something more than this? Like, is there something more than this temporary goodness that we experience, like coming home? And I think that question is what we're talking about with Echoes of the Garden. That there's these echoes that God created from the beginning of time with him, in relationship with him, that simply we can't get past. And my hope today is that if you're brand new here, that you'd be open to the things of God. That if you've been following Jesus for a long time, that it doesn't just become routine or something that you tick off in a box, but that you're open to where God might be stirring you. And maybe if you're exploring for the first time, that the thing you've been searching for all along, the deepest longings and maybe desires, and you're like, wow, that's going pretty deep here, Josh, but I know they exist. It might be even the reason you walk through the doors. And here's what I know, is that it wasn't convenient for you to get in your car and to come here. You made a decision, and part of that decision is you're saying, if there is something greater than myself, I'm here to experience that. And my hope is this, and my prayer is this today, that you'd understand that maybe the thing that you've been searching for all along has actually been searching for you all along. Now, in almost every great epic story, something happens at the end of it. In Lord of the Rings, Frodo destroys the ring, but he has to leave the Shire. But at the end of the Lord of the Rings, he returns back to the Shire. Any Lion King fans in the room? Hakuna Matata, right? Simba leaves home because he thinks that he was the one who killed his father. Interesting enough, we've been talking about temptations and the voices that we listen to. He listens to the voice of Scar, and I don't want to get into all of that. There's enough topics. You can go on YouTube and search through some of those things. But he leaves his home. And the end of Simba's story is that he finally is able to return back. We find this again with the Wizard of Oz, right? There's no place like home. There's no place like home. Isn't it fascinating that some of the most epic stories that we know, the desire is to return back to what was, to return to a place of safety, of comfort, of love, of joy, of a place that we're known. There's something in us that resonates with those stories. And the question that comes to mind for me is, why is that? And I believe because home isn't just a place. Now, it is for many of us. We will return to what we call home after the service today. But it has a greater meaning, and it's a place that we're fully known. The desire is to have a place where we're fully loved, where we're safe. And I think all of us search for that in some capacity. This is why we find it in these hero-like stories. Because some people, they search for home through relationships, or through money, or through success, or through achievement, or through travel, or through experiences, that once I get to here, I'm going to be able to fulfill finally the desires in myself, a longing for that place of safety, of rest, of home. But eventually we discover something, that nothing completely satisfies. C.S. Lewis was brilliant in his writing. I think he's one of the most prolific writers, at least in the last 100 years, if I can say that, at least in the Western world. But he writes these words, that if I find in myself desires which nothing in the world can satisfy, and I'm a rational, reasonable type thinker, he says this, the only logical explanation, if these desires exist for something greater than this world, is that I was made for another world. And my question is this, is what if that longing or that desire isn't just a flaw? Because some of us think, oh, when I can just finally figure that out, then everything will be the way it should be. But what if the desire is actually a clue? What if the longing for peace and for purpose and for love and for belonging is actually an echo of something that we were designed to experience? Now, in all 3 weeks of this series, we've looked at the very first stories in the Bible when we find ourselves in the Garden of Eden. Now, the Garden of Eden, many of us, when we think about it, we think, oh, it's that paradise type place. I actually talked about it last week. If you missed it, you can go back and watch it, or I'm going to give you just a quick synopsis here. But this idea of paradise, we have to ask ourselves the question, what made Eden paradise? Was it the fact that it had a river flowing through it? Was it the fact that there was beautiful mountains with trees, and in the winter they were snow-capped, and in the summer they had the FIFA games? And was it the fact that you could kayak on the river? Was it the fact that the animals weren't eating each other? What made Eden paradise? Now, many people would say, oh, well, it was the setting. But the reality is that we experience those settings every day. We experience the beauty of nature, we experience rivers, and we experience the natural beauty. But what made Eden paradise was not just rivers, was not just amazing fruit, was not just the animals or the beauty. Those things are all wonderful. But it's not what made Eden paradise. What we see described as making Eden paradise is that God was there, and Adam and Eve walked with him. They enjoyed time with him. They belonged. You see, Eden wasn't simply a beautiful place. It was home. And then the tension point enters the story. We read it here in Genesis chapter 3 that the woman is tempted to eat the fruit. Eve is tempted to eat the fruit. And when the woman saw that the fruit of the tree was good and pleasing to the eye and also desirable for gaining wisdom, she took and she ate it when God said, you can have anything else, just don't touch that tree. And then if you're like, oh, see, it was the woman's fault. No, then Adam comes along next. Like, she gave some to her husband, right? They're both involved in it, who was with her, and he ate it. And then the eyes of both of them, it says, were opened, and they realized that they were naked, and so they sewed fig leaves together and made coverings for themselves. And what happens is that they are now, there's a separation, and distance is created between them and God. And their first response, Adam and Eve's first response, is to hide from God. Not because God left, but because they chose to go their own way. And the tragedy wasn't simply losing a garden, although it sounds beautiful and an amazing place. The tragedy was losing an unhindered relationship with God. And if I could distill it into one experience, it seems as though it's like homesickness. That there was something that they experienced there that we all long for. Like we're a little bit homesick about. Recently, I was talking to somebody who was traveling on their own for the first time. And they were going to do a competition to compete at one of the highest levels. And I said, what are you most excited about and what are you most nervous about? They told me the things they were excited about, which was really awesome. I said, what are you most nervous about? And the person said this, that I would be away from my family for the first time. I thought, man, out of all the things that you would have chosen, why that? Because there's something about leaving home that makes us long for home again. And this is true with the human condition and what we all experience. And what the rest of the Bible outlines. Now, there's a lot of different details in that. But if we were to take a 30,000-foot view of a macro view of what the Bible shows us, is we see that in the garden, that humanity was separated from God. And that throughout the Old Testament, there's these incremental steps of God taking steps back towards humanity so that humanity might find its home and its peace again with God. Now, just to give you a little bit of an outline, and I'm going to move a little bit quick here, but it starts with God freeing his people from Egypt. We see this with Moses. As Moses frees the people with God's power and they enter into the desert. And God's presence is then put in a place called the tabernacle, which is basically like a glorified tent, okay? And in this tent, there's this inner room where something called an ark is sitting. And in that, it's displaying that this is where God's presence is. And nobody can enter it, but it's near God's people. But they can't be in relation. There's still a distance between them and God. And then this law is implemented. And it's about humanity trying to get their way back to God, and nobody can perform. But it's one step of God towards his people. And then in a more permanent way, we see that then a temple is actually built in Jerusalem. And this temple is built, and it's a permanent place where God will dwell in his people, at least as permanent as it can get. And Israel's like, it doesn't get any better than this. I guess this is God getting as close to us as possible. But then something fundamentally changes. And this whole Christianity movement, this whole thing that the church rises and falls on, happens. An event takes place where Jesus dies and rises again. And because of this, something fundamentally changes in the world. The gospel writer John puts it this way as he says, the word, and when we see capital letters, the word is capital, it's referring to God. That, in other words, God became flesh and dwelt among us. And I don't want to move too quickly through this. Because what happens here is God, as Eugene Peterson wrote, that God moves back into the neighborhood. It's Jesus is God's presence walking around humanity and interacting with humanity again, like once happened in the garden before. As we incrementally see through the Old Testament, God moving towards people in one foul swoop. And I hope I got that phrase right. And I'm looking at Ron in the front row because we were talking about phrases we get wrong. Sometimes I've said things for many years. That was right? Yeah, okay. What? Fell? Oh, my wife corrected me. Praise the Lord. Anyways, Jesus in one attempt makes a way back to humanity. And here we see God in flesh walking around with his people once again, like the garden. But something even more significant happens. Because Jesus, as he gives his life, as I've already said, what happens in that moment is that temple I talked about. There's a curtain in it that separates God's presence, or God, who God is, his essence, from the people. And when Jesus dies, the curtain is torn. It's a symbol that no longer is God separate from people, but that God is available to each and every person through the person of Jesus. It's this idea that Eden is returning again. That the home that we long for, the thing that we desire, will be fulfilled in God himself. And then if we fast forward right to the end of the Bible, it's not people simply escaping earth. It's not little baby angels with harps. It's not just clouds that people are floating on and golden gates. There's a city, there's a new earth. And the biggest part is that God is with his people again. And in the book of Revelation, we hear it this way. And this is John on the Isle of Patmos. He writes these words. And he says, I heard a loud voice from the throne saying, look, God's dwelling place is now among the people. And here's the thing, he will dwell with them. They will be his people. And God himself will be with him, and he will be their God. And here's what I love. And for everybody that is going through challenging moments that I've had the privilege of sitting with, through hearing about wars across the world, wondering, does it get any better than this? Wondering, when will it change? Will there be any difference in the future? This is a promise that God gives to his people, that one day he will wipe away every tear from their eyes. Death shall be no more. Neither shall there be mourning, nor crying, nor pain anymore, for the former things have passed away. The Bible begins in a garden, and the promise is that it ends in a perfect place. Why? Because God, all throughout the pages, is seeking restoration. It's not just an idea of getting into heaven, but of bringing heaven and earth back together, where everything that was once lost is restored, and everything that has been broken is made new, and everything that is separated is brought home. And here's where this gets personal. Because maybe you spent your whole life searching for a home. And you thought, maybe if I just get married, or if I just get that job, or the promotion, maybe if I just buy the house, maybe if I finally retire, then this will all feel complete. But then this longing, and you think that this longing for a better place might be fulfilled. But it's amazing to me how often those things can still leave us empty. And places that we make things, or places or people or things that we make ultimate, that were never meant to be ultimate in our lives, can leave us feeling like, is this all there is? And what the end of Revelation tells us, what we see in the person of Jesus, and at the beginning, what we experience is that this longing that we all have for something more is fulfilled in God. Jesus doesn't say that you can finally come and receive that when you get your life together. You can finally pick yourself up and clean yourself up. Then you can finally experience his kingdom and his goodness in that. No, he says this, come to me, all who are weary, and I will give you rest. The invitation is the story of the prodigal to come home. to be with God and to be his people. In the first week of this series, we talked about trust. Can we truly trust God's ways above our own? In the second week, we talked about love, a love that pursues us, not just when we get it all right, but the prerequisite for God pursuing us is that we didn't get it right. That because of the sin in our life, that he makes a way, as Tim Keller wrote, that we are more sinful and flawed than we ever dared to believe. And you're like, oh, that's terrible news, but it doesn't end there. Yet you are more loved and accepted in Jesus Christ than you had ever dared hope. And this week, what I want to say is this, is that Jesus invites us home again. The Bible is one story, that humanity walked away, that God came looking for us, and that Jesus made a way where no one else could, so that one day everything will be made new. What an incredible promise. And 600 years before I stood on a platform, there was a man by the name of Augustine. He wrote this prayer, that God, you have made us for yourself, and our hearts are restless until they find rest in you. And maybe that's your story. Maybe that restlessness isn't because something is wrong with you. Maybe you've been homesick all along. And today, Jesus is extending the same invitation he's been extending since Genesis, to come out of hiding and to come home and to be with him. Not when you earn it, not when you fixed yourself up, because the Father has been pursuing you from the very beginning and wants you to experience the home that you've been longing for, and ultimately wants to make his home in you. But it takes us stepping out. The one thing that God asks of us, he does all the heavy lifting, but the one thing he asks of us is to believe, to put our faith in who he is. To say, you know what, God, out of all the other things I could pursue, I pursue you first. And as we seek first God's kingdom and his ways in our life, it's incredible the way in which he transforms ours. So if you've been seeking for home, you've been longing for home, there's something that's been restless, and maybe you thought you'd mature past it, or maybe you thought you could finally get the one thing that's going to solve it. I believe that because we are made for home with God, that until we find rest with him, we will be restless the rest of our lives. But the good news is that in him we can find who we are. In him we can find peace. In him we can find joy. In him we can find fulfillment. And ultimately one day, who knows when that's going to be, but one day he'll make all things new again. Every tear, all the pain, all the suffering that we see and wonder, is there anything better than this? God is saying, yes, one day I will make all things new again. And the invitation is for everybody in this room. It's for everybody who covers the globe to come home. The homesickness that we feel, the longing for something more, is found only in God himself. So the invitation I want to extend to you is not an invitation that I'm simply giving, but an invitation from God to follow him. And so today I'm just going to ask that you close your eyes and maybe just take a moment. And there's a lot of busyness in our lives. Like, we can think about World Cup scores, and we can think about what's going to happen next after service, or how we're going to have that complex conversation, or how am I going to get through the next week, or how am I going to get, we can get lost on the future. But here's what I want to just do today, just to take a moment to take stock of where we are. If there's a restlessness, if there's a longing, if there's a desire for something more in our life, that I do believe God in this moment wants to meet us here. That the thing that we most desire, he wants to fulfill. So God, in this moment, as we sit with you, That God, we have that echo of the garden. This echo rings in us for something better than we currently experience. A place where we can connect with you personally. A place of no more tears or pain. A place where, God, we can be fully loved in a way we've never experienced. And as great as our parents were, they're not you. That, God, we can find home, a place where we can be safe. That, God, you are a great place of safety and rest. You're our fortress. And so, God, today, whether it's somebody for the first time or being reminded today again that, God, our longing for home is only found in you, and the things around us in this world will never satisfy in the way that only you do. So, God, remind us of that today. Help us to seek you first above all other things. And today I pray that rest, that peace, that joy would be found in you. And whatever we need, God, that in this moment, that we would receive it. That we don't have to move any further, but God, here and now, we can find our rest in you. You invite us to come home, to be with you, our Father. So God, we're here. We're here. Fill us, we pray. In your amazing name, amen.